So I'll call attendance. Am I here? Let me look and see if I'm staring back at myself on my phone. Yes, I am. Peter is here. Linda, are you there?
I am here as well.
And it looks as though Mr. Gainsborough has joined us. Dan,
I am here, a little late, sorry.
no worries. And Shannon is with us, and we have some members of the public. That's great. So, uh, we're missing a couple of our normal board members who have committed to, in Linda's words, things that are more important than work, like family. And they are off out and about on this vacation week. And so we're getting ready to really start the sprint next week. And I thought it might be helpful if we sort of went through some of the stakeholders and figured out who we as the land use committee would want to hear from in order to gather information to assist the consultants in their work. Now, I think it's also important for us as members of the advisory board to be hearing from these community groups, not just the consultants. So that's why I thought taking a look at the list would be useful. We've already heard from the Historic Commission, and they want to meet with us. The Traffic Committee, I think we certainly want to hear from. Natural Resources, if they've got more insight into what's on the property that they can share. And I'm sure there are other committees, and I just ask if anyone's got anything off the top of their head, or we can just ask Shannon to share the idea. And we have Elisa Brown with her hand up. You're muted, Elisa.
Yep. I just wanted to, I'm the river ambassador for the Wild and Scenic, Wild and Stewart, which you've got 1,500 feet or so of frontage on the Assabet. And so the Wild and Scenic River Stewardship Council is very interested in the activities that will go along in the riverfront, and also the view shed from that portion of the river, which is considered scenic. So
that's great, Lisa. Yeah, so we'll make sure that we touch base with the Wild and Scenic group. What I think we're going to want to do is have, so if you have any sort of basic information that we could use that's sort of at the beginning of the process, which is basically, views from the property to the river is what you consider important to protect. And we've got the riverfront setback, and so we'll try and respect that. But if you've got any ideas that your group might want to share with us, I would invite you to talk with your colleagues who are riverfront ambassadors and put together some bullet points and send it back to us so we can share it with our consultant team.
All right, is that something I would put in an email to you?
Yeah, you can put it in an email to me or to the, I would make sure you copy the MCI advisory board email, and Shannon, maybe you could share that in the chat. And Elisa, that would be incredibly helpful for us.
Okay.
Yeah, we just want to make sure we get as much stuff in some sort of written format that we can share with the consultant team. But also we want to hear it too. So, we can remind folks as we go along of what the community considers to be important issues.
So I have a question, Peter, just sort of about process here.
Mm-hmm.
So we have this wonderful list, and there are categories of groups. So say, for example, recreation. There are all the youth sports teams on that. I guess the rec department, whatever. In a grouping, is this something to decide, like, but how is planning and land management sort of, do you envision us interacting with those groups as a
No, I would,
singly or as a group, or do you see them?
I'd ask the
Added to-
recreation department to represent them. So town department that's in contact with all of them, and recognizing that the communications committee is going to be reaching out to them. I'm trying to figure out, who we should at least invite in to talk with us, or we go and talk to them, so that we get some input sooner rather than later. There's only so many weeks between now and the end of June, and I think I'm just trying to be proactive and come up with a list of some that would, on that list that John had, there's an item called other, and I think we would sort of put ourselves under the other category. He and I spoke before he went off to Amsterdam, and he suggested that we maybe come up with another category to address land use issues that touch on other committees. So
I don't, I'm just looking at this and I'm not, I don't see really other. Maybe
yeah, it's over on the far
I
right.
see on the far one.
Right.
So that would include relevant state agencies. Am I reading this wrong? I must be. And
Oh,
I think what it is, if I
Oh, good.
understand it correctly, and it's the first few categories there are who's going to take the lead.
yeah.
First 5 or 6, among the MCI or consultant.
Maybe I have the wrong document. I just have the legal group.
Are you looking at the screen?
Oh, no, sorry.
That's okay.
I have this
Shannon
sort of the
snuck it
same
up while
thing,
you were
but
talking.
not the one that Shannon has.
So there's one that is on the website that has part of it like cut off, so we don't have all of these people's contact information posted publicly. So perhaps the other column is cut out on the version that's in PDF online. But what we can do, like, see, these little toggles can be changed depending on who the lead is. The ones that legal and government affairs are the lead on are the ones that were named in the legislation. And then I think sort of what John had in mind was that for the time being, everything else is tabbed community outreach. Do I think they are interested in being the lead on every single one of these groups? Probably not. So, like the Wild and Scenic Rivers group, if you all wanted to be the lead with them, or
Yep.
some of the other environmental groups, we could easily change that.
Yeah, and what I wanted to do was just have us start discussing that so we could get out in front of these issues. I think it's really important that when the advisory board is meeting with community groups, that it not just be the consultant they're listening. I think we need to sort of be, showing the flag and meeting with the community groups. And we know the consultants are going to be collecting information and then creating slideshows at each of the crucial points along the route, but I think it's going to be us going out and delivering the presentations and soliciting the input in addition to the big community meetings that are already calendared as part of the proposal. So I just thought we should start thinking about it and identifying who is a land use committee we should be chatting with. So if anyone has ideas, you know, like I said, natural resources, you know, probably the affordable housing groups when they meet together as a one body. When Keith calls everyone together, the recreation
Wait, Peter,
transportation. Yeah.
I wonder if it would help us to think about the questions that we would be asking of this group, or I guess, or are you imagining that we're going to generally ask the similar set of questions to these different groups?
Yeah, I want, you know, what I would want is I would want their insight on the property and the issues adjacent to it. So transportation, tell us what their thoughts are on Commonwealth Ave and, you know, the bike path and other ways of connecting to the site. Whether they think, you know, we need 2 or 3 access points to the property, you know, just trying to generate some information from them.
So it occurs to me that depending upon who we're speaking to, there, to your point, example you just gave, it's probable, I guess, that they would have different priorities or different concerns. And so maybe stepping up a level and saying, you know, what are you concerned about and what are your priorities and what are your aspirations, that kind of stuff. I mean,
I think that
because
would be really helpful. Yeah. Yeah. And then ask if they have any, you know, specific knowledge of the property that they could share with us and the consultant team.
yeah, I think that's a great question, you know, as there, because we may not, there's a high probability we wouldn't know. So then it kind of comes back to your original question, I guess, which is, right, so as the land use group, maybe we just go down, scan Shannon's list here quickly, but, you know, identify, just starting at the top, identify people that we think would be important for us to talk to.
Yeah, that sounds good.
I think Shannon, you're the only one that can
Scroll.
manipulate that sheet, right?
Yeah, at least live.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know if you guys want to just start going through and when you want me to maybe change the lead, let me know.
Yeah, so maybe
Yeah.
just starting at the top and somebody, we can just say stop or pause or whatever.
Yeah,
If
and
there's,
the legal and government affairs we're gonna leave alone, I think, so.
That sounds good.
So
Yeah.
I'll just start going past those and I'll pause for a minute here now.
Okay, so the Affordable Housing Advocates Group of Keith Bergen, it's not advocates, but there's another name for it, so we'll skip
yeah,
that.
and be on mass, right? Or
Yeah.
as a, yeah, which I vote for that.
And climate action is really.
wait a sec, so we're
No,
saying that,
just leave that one alone because that's individuals. There's an en masse group that is further down in the list.
well, I don't really know what the affordable housing advocates, is
So
that,
if you
I've
look at
never
it,
heard of that.
it's not a group, it's a group of individuals that were going to be reached out to by the communications committee. And they will probably be covered by one of the affordable housing groups in town further down in the list.
Okay,
So that's a category, if I understand it correctly, Peter, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like that's a category of folks that have historically voiced concerns about affordable
Yes,
housing issues. They're not a
that's my
recognized
understanding.
group.
but is that that's not the round table?
No,
The
that's
housing
not the
round
round
table?
table. That's not the housing round table.
Okay,
The housing
so-
round table is where we want to go.
right, right. But it would seem to me, if we're going to reach out to the round table, which I thought was fairly comprehensive, if we ignore this other affordable housing advocates group,
So it's not a group, it's a
or
bunch of individuals. So
oh, it's a bunch of,
what we
okay,
could do is
whatever,
we
but
could ask John and the communications group to let all of the folks who would be categorized around affordable housing, let them know that we'll be going to the roundtable to meet with them.
okay. It seems to me like eventually we're gonna have like spheres, you know?
Yeah,
Okay,
and we'll
All
be
right.
looking for the intersecting points and drawing all sorts of cool diagrams before we know it.
yes.
So we already know there's a meeting with the Climate Action Committee, but I think it's important that members of the Land Use Committee show up when that meeting is held. I know John's got something scheduled.
Okay. If we're going alphabetically,
Mhm.
I think that before we jump to community preservation, that we don't have on this list, I don't think, that communities for restorative justice. And I do think that's a group we should reach out to, but I don't know if that makes sense for land planning and land management. I don't really think it does. But I think it should be on the list.
That's great. Let's, Shannon, if you could just pass that suggestion along to John and the community outreach team.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So Community Preservation Committee, is that someone we should be meeting with?
I don't think so.
Okay.
What
just-
about you, Dan? I mean, I
I
don't
mean,
want to.
not early, but later.
Yeah, I think that's the point, Peter. I think I would agree with that.
Sort of going down, sort of,
You know, and I would say, I mean, I think right now there's various groups of all these youth groups that are circulating and have a lot to say about MCI Concord. And I think if we just ask the rec department to represent them, I think it's a pretty large constituency and they're quite vocal. So I just want to
Maybe-
put that out there.
maybe we should ask the rec department to call a meeting of all of them that we could attend.
Well, I think that maybe that's one opportunity. I don't know if that should be planning and land management or
Oh.
community outreach. I don't know where it really belongs, but I know it's pretty active and vocal, and I think there will be a lot of you know, a lot of people who hope to have input from those
Let's
segments.
let's make sure we put that on the agenda for Monday. Shannon, if you could make a note for or the next MCI meeting after the kickoff that we look to reach out to the recreation users community for input, and maybe as the full advisory board or the community outreach group specifically, and we can discuss who's the appropriate group to talk to them at our full advisory board. That's a great input. Thank you, Linda. All right. So the Housing Authority, the Housing Foundation, we'll do that with the joint meeting.
I would think we may want to talk to CLCT,
Okay.
just throwing that out. They're sort of
Okay.
stewards of open space and, right?
Sure.
And can you elaborate on your thinking there?
My thinking?
Yes.
Sorry. Well, they seem to have their hand in a good way. All matters related to protected open space throughout the town and trying to assemble it and trying to figure out how to connect various, there's more connectivity and people can enjoy the trails. And it seems like this has the potential to enhance connectivity, especially through West Concord and Warner's Pond and Girard Park and the bike trail. So
Okay.
that's, as a land use, I suspect, especially given the Rivers Protection Act and 1,500, as Elisa pointed out, 1,500 feet of frontage. That's a big chunk of land. That be interesting to hear what they have to say.
So could they and the Wild and Scenic Riverfront, and I guess it's ORS, be a group of open space and connectivity advocates, or that we
I think that I
can work?
personally, I think that would be ideal. And I think what we're noticing, at least I'm sort of noticing as we're going through this and people are pointing it out. I think if we could task those various groups with doing some of that advanced work so that we're not having just in terms of Peter's point about not a long runway between now and the 30th. How can we get people to start those conversations and really be efficient with their aspirations, and we'd have to feed them the questions like we talked about earlier. That would be ideal. So if we can, maybe part of what we could do, like we're doing, is just sort of identify things that, at least from our understanding, it might logically connect. The devil is in the details, in that some of these groups may or may not play nicely together. I'd like to believe in the possibility of everyone working together, but I don't know.
Dan, two things. I think, as either through your organizations you've mentioned for open space, I don't think it's not that we don't play nicely together, but I think, as the case would be with other groups you're trying to organize, everybody's got slightly different interests and priorities. And so I wanted to put that in. The other thing is, as you're trying to get people to provide you information beforehand, are you asking us to self-organize into a group, which I think is going to be hard to do?
Yeah, no,
Uh,
listen, two great points, and I'm
yeah.
sorry to be in my glib. I did not mean to be disrespectful to anybody. It was more just an acknowledgement that I think to your point, they may have different priorities, and they may also um, not have a mechanism for interacting with one another. I think though that I guess what I'm trying to sort of sort out in my head is that there's so much work to do between now and then. And we want to make sure all the voices are heard, that I think we're all going to be doing, when I say all, everyone on the AB and everyone that is a stakeholder in supporting those planning efforts. I think we're all going to have to figure out ways to um, to work productively together. And I don't I don't know that the AB can realistically can say everybody has to do this, but maybe it can, because in order to, at the end of the day, we're all limited and constrained by the calendar. And so we may need to be out front of that and say, here are the set of questions that we need to ask or need answers for. Here's the timetable for answering that. And if there are connectivity issues, meaning connectivity as it relates to priorities or big picture, then we kind of need you guys to get together and sort that out. Otherwise, we're left with the possibility, sorry, I'm going on so long, but the possibility that we get these things and they're literally at odds. And then how do we reconcile that?
Or, or we by default look to one group to provide leadership and leave others out, which would also be not the best outcome.
Agreed. I think the point of the smarter minds that have created this advisory board, I think, are recognizing that it's planning. And this is difficult stuff to do. And so, the only way that we're gonna move forward is if we can figure out how to productively get together and reconcile some of our different aspirations. And the question is, I like what you're suggesting, Linda, although I realize that you weren't necessarily saying it that way, but I like this idea that potentially to aggregate some of these groups and have them sit in a room and work it out. And I like that candidly, and I think it's going to be, I'm saying this because I think it's going to be ultimately in everyone's benefit, that if they can do that before we start having the charrettes, because otherwise we're going to be spending an inordinate amount of time in those charrettes reconciling these things. And if we can take 90% of them or 80% of them and resolve them before we get into that, that's going to make, I think, for a better outcome and smoother planning process. Not that planning is ever particularly smooth, but
So Dan, might our land use advisory board function in a way to sort of get all of the open space groups to come to a meeting with us? Do a Zoom meeting with us and we go through our questions with them?
I think that's a really interesting. You broke up there a little bit, but I think I got the gist of it. I think that's a really interesting idea, Peter. And I think in some respects, we could become the mechanism by which people, these various groups, understand what's expected from what we need from them, and what we're trying to accomplish. Because, it's great that we're having this conversation now, and then we're going to have to communicate it to a lot of people. And what concerns me is if we don't go in there with some kind of structure or edges, we're going to just get overwhelmed and we're going to have to translate and reconcile these things. And I think there's a very high risk of people being misunderstood and unhappy with the outcome of that. So
Okay.
we're kind of, if you think about it this way, and I'm out on a limb here a little bit, but if we're kind of creating essentially what I think we're trying to do, and maybe this is where you were going, Peter, is we're trying to create common language, right?
Mhm.
So that when we come together, we understand what each other mean by certain priorities and certain terms.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting way of looking at it. Okay. All right, so we're trying to think of higher level questions for the groups, such as their aspirations for the site, any priorities they might have for this site, and then any special knowledge or insight about the property. Were those sort of the three questions that we flushed out? Is there anything else we wanted to add to that in terms of questions that would be in common?
That's my recollection. And I think those are good.
Mhm.
All right, so we've got types of groups. We've got environmental, affordable housing, recreation, historic, transportation,
Economic vitality, commercial, I know.
yeah, sort of the chamber economic development, economic vitality suite of West Concord Advisory, or West Concord Business Group.
Have cultural,
Yeah,
yeah, museum. One. I guess it could also have equity, which would be restorative justice and DEI.
mm-hmm. Maybe another question we might have for people is, how does their priorities relate to land use?
Mm-hmm.
Can I say something?
Please.
I just noticed that the Concord Can, you have SM can't find info online. There is actually a Concord Can website, which has been updated recently. But I don't want my name, I'm on the steering committee, but I want my name on it because I'm already further up your column. But I would suggest that either Janet Rothrock or Scott Richardson take that role. And I can put their email in the chat if you would like.
That would be great.
Okay, I'll do that.
I don't know
Jane.
if chat is working, because I tried to use it earlier and it was blocking me from using it.
Oh,
So I don't know if we're able to do that, but, yeah. I can check the website again if there is, if you think there's like a general email on the website.
Well, there is an email for the steering group which goes out to several people, but I think it might be better to have a lead person rather than just going to everybody. There is no formal president. The steering committee meets tomorrow evening, and I can bring up this and ask who would like to be the contact person and let you know.
Yeah, that's great.
Do you want, Shannon, you're the person they should.
I'm populating this, yeah, so if you could put them in touch with me, that would be great.
Okay, I'll do that.
that's terrific.
And meanwhile, I'll put Janet Rothrock's email address in the chat for you.
Yeah, again, Shannon made the point that the chat may not be working, but if it
Maybe
is,
it's working for other people, I don't know, but it wouldn't let me send a
I
message.
don't know. It's down there on the bottom, so I guess I can try. Or I can just email it to you, Shannon, I think.
Yeah, that's helpful, thank you.
all right. So we're coming up with some broad categories here, which is great. We've got environmental, affordable housing, recreation, historic, transportation, sort of economic development, cultural,
I called it equity, but that could be, I don't know.
yeah, that I think that's reasonable. And then what we can do with the full group is ask the other subcommittees, community outreach and governance, to help us, here are the questions we think should be asked in common of all the groups. Can we set up, meetings with them and ask those questions? And can you help us do that, other MCI members, committees? All right, why don't we sort of continue scrolling down through the lists here? Maybe something else will pop out at us. Yeah. Do you think we should meet with the Public Works Commission? Because we know they're advocating for space on the site.
I would assume maybe the uh, advisory board as a whole would
Should meet with them.
be having that discussion rather than just land use and
Yeah.
planning.
And we certainly hear from Alan somewhat regularly. And Alan Cathcart, he also attends the the bi-weekly DCAM coordination meetings.
Okay, that's good. I guess we should add Trails Committee to the environmental groups.
Is that an environmental or is that open space? I don't know that it matters.
Oh, yeah, it's probably like Natural Resources and Trails Committee.
Natural
They're
resources.
actually a subcommittee of the NRC.
Are they?
Yes.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. So NRC would probably cover the Trails Committee, but we'd want to make sure we had someone from that subcommittee. attending. Waters Pond.
Peter, so do you want to come up with like these groups and then forward that to Shannon and have everyone look at that? Or do you want to do that one by one here today?
Well, I was hoping we could take a cut at it.
Oh, okay. So then you want to just sort of, are we just starting with, I'm sorry. So I'm kind of lost as to where we are right now.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, well, that's the advantage of getting started early. Yeah, you can't be lost if you aren't going anywhere. So,
Well,
let's
you know, it's an interesting, Linda, your question's kind of interesting to me because maybe I wonder if it wouldn't, I wonder if it might facilitate our ability to do this if we were to let Shannon, you know, now that we've identified the groups, and I'm not sure we're all working off the same set of groups, but maybe we can concentrate on agreeing on what the groups are, categories, or whatever the right
sure.
term is, and then let Shannon reorganize them and then figure out if anything's missing and
Okay.
who we want to talk to. I mean, we did identify a few people, a few groups that we want to talk to.
Mhm.
Yeah.
All right, let me restate the categories.
Great.
Because I'm also feeling a little unclear on like, it doesn't necessarily sound like with some of them that you all want to be the lead on them.
That's correct. We want to
Mhm.
organize the categories and then ask the full advisory board to help with meetings with the overall categories.
Yeah,
And I do think we want to, I'm not saying this is the only source of questions, but I do think and maybe this is done in tandem with the community outreach group and our consultant. But I think we
Mhm.
want to I think we want to maybe be the driving force on creating a common set of questions and um, and setting the expectations on how the information is going to be collected and then transmitted, especially as we pointed out that it's possible that there could be some differing views on what the priorities are. So I feel like that's hugely, we and the CEO is about probably the only people that can kind of communicate that consistently to these different stakeholders and set the expectations.
Yeah, and I'm thinking what would be really helpful is make sure that when we have these meetings, we have at least two members of the MCI committee there, so that if it gets by one person, the other person was there and heard the information, and you have sort of a check on the information that got generated.
I think that's a great idea, Peter.
Okay, so lists of potential committees,
Can I just,
equity.
can I
Go
ask
ahead.
a question first? Because I'm concerned about being lumped into a specific group. Because I know, for example, the Wild and Scenic River Stewardship Council has just as much of a recreation focus and somewhat of a historical focus in addition to environmental. And so I was wondering how you're thinking of organizing groups that span different categories.
Yeah,
I don't think, sorry.
yeah, I was just gonna say we're sort of in information gathering and listening. So if we miscategorize you and you say we want to have a canoe landing or a boat landing, and we want to have the preserve the view shed to the river, both of those will be heard and recorded and passed on, and then there are going to be these larger charrettes where you'll get to share them beyond just the committee and the consultants, but with the rest of the community.
Yeah, I just want to build on that. I don't see this as a limiting thing, Alyssa. In other words, I don't see because you're put in a certain category means you can only talk about those issues. In fact, I think part of what makes Concord great is that we do, people do have sort of more than a one-dimensional set of concerns, and so and a lot of these things are there's overlaps between them. And so hearing, I can imagine if we come up with the right questions, and I'm not suggesting this is the right question, but if we start with things like what are your priorities for the site or concerns about it or whatever, that to me hopefully is not that narrow that somebody can say, picking up on Peter's example, a combined set of considerations.
Yeah.
So
But thanks. I think this will be the same issue for lots of these groups, lots of different interests. So
I agree.
Yeah. So sort of a broad category of economic development, a broad transportation category, historic issues, recreation issues, affordable housing, and the super broad and environmental issues. More specifically, natural resources. And maybe that's going to be similar to Public Works. We want to sit down with the Natural Resources Commission as well as the Public Works Commission just to get their input. Other broader categories?
I thought either I made these up or I thought I heard you say a couple other things. One was the culture and the arts.
Yeah, yeah.
One was, and I don't know where we landed. Linda brought up this idea of equity or social justice. She didn't say social justice, but that was kind of where I thought she was maybe going. And then schools, religious groups, I guess. Municipal, Peter, you did mention municipal, so that you talked about that relative to DPW. And then I had two others that, yeah, and maybe it's not even necessary to say it, but one is state agents. It's the state sort of concerns different than the municipal. And then, and I don't, maybe this isn't the same thing, but the people that take sort of a regional view, whether it's MPC or Magic or whatever, do they deserve a category? I don't know the answer to that.
Yep. Those are all good points. Some of these are going to be more just, hearing what their concerns are, like the number of school kids that could potentially be generated under different scenarios. And I think just being aware of what the school folks want in terms of information would be important. So yeah. All right. So we've got a list, and all the ones we don't like, we give to the Communications and Outreach Committee, right? All right. Good.
I don't think they're going to have anything left to do once we're finished with this.
No.
If we're doing
gonna
our
have-
jobs right, Linda, that's success.
All right. So I've got to take my wife to a doctor's appointment. So I will jot down a list of the broad categories of outreach
And the questions.
and the 4 questions that we ended up with, which were
I think for what it's worth, I think this was great. I think we actually I know it's may not feel like it, but I think we actually accomplished a lot.
good. All right, well,
Thank you, Peter.
we got to hit the ground running as we've been saying. So I think this is one way to help to try and do that.
Okay, so we're ready for the kickoff? Is that the next?
Yeah, that's gonna be on Tuesday. I just got confirmation from agency this afternoon that they would be able to make the start time that we suggested. And we suggested first thing in the morning, like 9 a.m. at the light plant. So I'll get an agenda posted and a calendar invite out to you guys. And then they will have their site visit at the prison, and then they can mosey around the other adjacent sites.
And can we participate in the visit?
Site
I
visit?
haven't been to the site.
To the prison?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I think that is up in the air a little. I don't think it's a no. But I think I would need to go back to Mark on that. I think Mark said that he just like, I think it's a team of like 16 consultants that's gonna be going from their end to the prison. And then I think Mark told me he said something like, and some town representatives. So I think if for the people, I know there were a small number of you who couldn't make the first site tour. I can ask Mark if you could be included in that contingency.
Great.
That would be welcome. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Any members of the public have any comments before we say adios?
Oh, can you guys approve the meeting minutes from your last meeting?
I would be happy to receive a motion to approve the meeting minutes from our last meeting
The January 21st
of
minutes.
January 21st.
I move that we approve the minutes of January 21st from our last meeting.
I second.
All those in favor, Dan, aye, Linda,
Aye,
Peter, aye. All right, thank you. And
thank you,
Thank
everybody.
you,
yeah,
Janet.
and Elisa, thanks for chiming in. It's appreciated.
Yeah, good
we
comments.
we need input, so thank you, and Lee and Linda and Janet as well.
Janet.
Yeah,
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
Thank you, guys.
Take care.
Thanks.
Bye.
All right. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Too.
Two. Bye.